General Dunford, thank you for being here today. Thank you for you and your family for your service. I want to remind the committee that the first ship was, I believe, the USS Mercy in Port-au-Prince after the earthquake. And I want to thank the military on record here for always being the first in crisis like this in Puerto Rico. I want to highlight again a quote that was already referred to by the chairman this morning, because I think in February you called out this crisis. We have a global security crisis, but we have a debt crisis. And the two right now are, and you're the first one, I believe, to call this out. Your quote was, "Without sustained, sufficient, and predictable funding, I assess that within 5 years, we will lose our ability to project power, the basis of how we defend the homeland, advance U.S. interest, and meet our alliance commitments." Wow. Sir, that's a few months forward. Do you still stand by that assessment?
Senator, I do. And you know, if I could just make a quick comment. I know many times the perception is that military leaders will never be satisfied with good enough and they'll always want more. And so somehow maybe people aren't looking at those comments with the seriousness that I intended them to be. I would not have made those comments without having gone on a long journey of analytic rigor to really, truly be able to quantify exactly what I'm talking about. I think we've shared with you, Senator, because of your interest. We've shared with you some of the results of our work. But those words are backed by a fairly exhaustive analytic effort that shows specific capability areas where we are in the process of losing our competitive advantage. And in the aggregate, when you go out 4 or 5 years, the loss of our competitive advantage in those specific areas means we will not be able to project power when and where necessary to advance our interests. That does two things. It not only affects our response to crisis, but it increases the probability there will be a crisis because it will have an adverse effect on a deterrent capability of the U.S. military. I believe that one of the things that deters others today from a conventional conflict is their knowledge that we do have a competitive conventional advantage over any adversary today, and we can project power when and where necessary to advance our interests. Were we to lose that, I believe that there would be an increased possibility of conflict, particularly against our peer competitors.
Well, that's the question I have today for you, sir, is, you know, if you look at the latest estimate, back in 2011, then Chairman Gates, Secretary of Defense then, made the estimate based on a bottoms-up estimate from the military on needs, and that estimate was, in today's dollars, for 2016, about $753 billion. Last year, we actually appropriated $623 only. That's all of Category 050, I believe. This year, it's going to be a little bit greater than that, 677 or thereabouts, but we're still significantly less than just what Secretary Gates wanted back then for 2016. That was before ISIS, Crimea, Ukraine, Syria, Iran, North Korea, and on and on and on. With Russia and China's growing capabilities. Sir, my question, and oh, by the way, you mentioned 3 to 7%. I don't disagree with that. I don't know what the need is, but I know that we are at a low point right now historically. I can look at the history. We've averaged over the last 30 years after Vietnam 4%. We're now at 3%. That 100 basis points is $200 billion. So any way you look at it today, my estimate is somewhere between 150 and 200 that we're short today, even with being $89 billion above the BCA. Sir, my question is, how do you determine the priorities going forward with that kind of shortfall? Because every dime that we're spending on the military today and on our veterans and on all domestic discretionary spending, let me say this again, every dime that we spend on our military and our veterans today, by definition, is borrowed money. In the last 8 years, and it's projected the next 10 years will be similar, we borrowed 35% of what we spend as a federal government. 25% of that spending is discretionary, and military is part of that. Sir, given all of that, you and Secretary Mattis have talked about the first step in the strategy is filling the hole. Are we on board doing that now with the appropriation this year? And what does the next 2 or 3 years look like in terms of trying to catch up with a number of years, not just the last 6 or 8, a number of years, 20 years even, of disinvesting in the military?
No, thanks, Senator. The way that we have characterized in our recommendations is that we have readiness challenges. That's been described as the filling the holes. We have lethality challenges, and by that we mean areas like electronic warfare, cyber capability, our strike capability that needs to be improved. And then there's a capacity issue. And ideally, we'd be addressing all of those. We'd be addressing the current readiness of the force that we have. would be improving the capabilities we need for tomorrow, and would be increasing the capacity of the force to meet the overall requirements that we have. So the way we've chosen to prioritize it is to make sure that we, number one, make sure that the men and women today in those units that we're deploying have the wherewithal to accomplish the mission with minimal loss of life or equipment. That's job one. The second thing we're doing, and you saw this in the last 2 years, is starting to make increased investments, number one, in our nuclear enterprise, because deterring nuclear war is job one for the department, and then addressing some of these deficiencies in cyber capabilities, electronic warfare, ballistic missile defense, which we've spoken about. What we have not done is come in with a recommendation to increase the size or the capacity of the force, because in my judgment, we should not do that unless we can do it in a balanced way. And there's no way with the current level of resourcing we have and the projected level of resourcing that we can grow the force in a balanced way. So I think we're forced to fill the holes, address the readiness, and then do what we can to invest in the capabilities that we need to maintain competitiveness today and tomorrow. But I don't see in the near term our ability to really grow the force to get after the dynamic that has been discussed a bit this morning, where we have fewer ships than are necessary even to do ballistic missile defense on a day-to-day basis in the Pacific. And that's the challenge that we have, and that's kind of the three ways we think about it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.